The millionaire's son lay still on the marble floor, eyes shut, body cold with shock, while Maid knelt beside him holding something small, dark, and moving. "Grace, what did you do?" The words barely escaped the lips of those who rushed into the room, panic heavy in every step. Footsteps thundered through the mansion, echoing off the grand walls, yet the moment seemed suspended in time, frozen between fear and wonder. But to understand why the world had halted in that heartbeat, one must step back to the quiet that preceded it. Thank you for sticking around with me. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. It was a Sunday morning in the Whitmore estate, the kind of silence that was not peaceful but absolute. Sunlight streamed through gold-trimmed curtains, falling in pools of warmth across polished marble floors. In the grand music room, 7-year-old Adrian Whitmore sat at the enormous piano, small fingers trembling just above the ivory keys he could never hear. Born deaf, the boy had never known a single note, yet he approached the instrument with reverence, as if it might somehow whisper the secrets of life into the depths of his heart. His world was silent, yes, but it was not empty. It was full of light, texture, and an ache for something beyond reach. The piano itself seemed almost alive, the polished lid reflecting Adrian's face as he pressed a fingertip to one key, imagining vibration as music. He traced the contours of the other keys, moving slowly, carefully, as though he were trying to feel the invisible patterns of sound around him. Though the air was still and the room hushed, he felt the weight of something waiting, a presence hovering just beyond comprehension. And in that delicate tension, the life of the boy intersected with a force long kept hidden. Across the room, in the shadowed corridor that smelled faintly of polished wood and old perfume, Mariah Johnson stood silently, holding against her chest a faded crimson cloth. The fabric was old, worn by time, but within it lay something powerful, something she had promised herself she would never reveal again. She had watched Adrian grow from a fragile infant into a boy who lived in quiet determination, and she had learned to read the language of his silence. Every glance, every tremor of the lips, every shift of the eyes spoke volumes to her. She knew the longing in him, the way he reached for a world he could not hear. On that morning, Mariah felt the pull of destiny stronger than she had ever known. She stepped into the room, her bare feet silent on the marble, the crimson cloth still pressed to her chest. Adrian's gaze flicked toward her, not in surprise, but in recognition, as though he had sensed her presence long before she appeared. The sunlight seemed to pause on that moment, highlighting the fragile anticipation between them. Every shadow in the room deepened. Every glimmer of gold on the curtains trembled with possibility. Mariah knelt beside him, laying the crimson cloth gently on the floor. And in that silent exchange, untouched by words and unbroken by sound, the first spark of fate moved, threading its way between a boy born deaf and a world he had yet to fully touch. The estate seemed to hold its breath, as if the very walls and polished marble floors were aware of the way of the moment unfolding in the music room. Mariah knelt beside Adrian, the faded crimson cloth resting delicately between them. Her hands trembled just slightly, not from fear, but from the gravity of what she was about to reveal. The fabric, worn and frayed at the edges, contained a secret older than she had ever dared to imagine sharing, a power she had promised would remain hidden forever. Yet the boy before her, small, silent, and unknowing, seemed to pull that promise toward him as naturally as the sun pulled the morning light across the estate. Adrian's eyes, wide and unblinking, followed her every movement. There was curiosity there, yes, but also something deeper, an instinctive recognition, a silent understanding that whatever was about to emerge in the cloth would alter the stillness of his world. The boy did not need to hear to sense the extraordinary. He felt in the tension in the air, in the way sunlight danced across the floor and cast elongated shadows that seemed to bend toward him. The room pulsed subtly, invisibly, as though the estate itself had leaned in to witness the awakening of something that had been waiting for him all along. Mariah's presence, though small in physical stature, radiated a quiet authority, protective and watchful, She guided her hands over the cloth with reverence. She allowed the folds to fall back, revealing the outline of the object hidden within, careful not to disturb the invisible threads of energy connecting it to the boy. Every motion was measured, deliberate. Every breath she drew seemed synchronized with the silent rhythm of the room. She had spent years guarding this secret, carrying it as one carries a weight too heavy for the ordinary world to bear. But now, facing Adrian, she understood that the universe had conspired for this precise moment, and that hesitation would only deny the inevitability of what must come. The sunlight glinted off the edges of the cloth as it peeled back, revealing the object within, dark, small, yet undeniably alive with potential. It hummed in a way that no ear could hear, vibrating through the air and into the boy's chest. Adrian's small fingers twitched, almost drawn toward it, a magnetic pull he could not resist. His breath caught in his throat, though he could not speak the word that formed there. The room seemed to hold itself still for him, every shadow and shard of sunlight waiting for him to acknowledge the presence of something far larger than any soundless moment of his life had ever promised. Mariah watched closely, heart hammering, knowing that this was a delicate intersection of past and future, of power long dormant and destiny now stirring. The energy between Adrian and the mysterious object crackled quietly, invisible yet palpable, as if the state itself had become a conduit for the impossible. Time stretched, elongated, and yet was alive in every pulse, every tremor in the boy's awareness. Finally, as Mariah's hands hovered, guiding the moment without forcing it, the first thread of connection formed between boy and object, an unspoken acknowledgement of fate neither could yet fully comprehend. The air vibrated, the shadows leaned closer, and the state seemed to exhale softly, as though the universe had been holding its breath just for this. The moment stretched, suspended between anticipation and revelation, as the mysterious object slowly revealed itself beneath Mariah's careful hands. Adrian's small fingers inched closer, guided by something he could not see, but instinctively understood. The pendant, dark, intricate, and humming with a power invisible to the eye, seemed to awaken the very air around them. The sunlight shifted across the room, glinting off polished surfaces, casting flickering shadows that danced like quiet witnesses to what was unfolding. Every corner of the grand music room, from the high ceiling adorned with golden trim to the marble floors beneath them, seemed to lean in, attentive to the boy and the secret now breathing between them. Adrian reached out, brushing his fingertips against the cool surface of the object. A shiver passed through him, not from cold but from recognition, a sensation deeper than sound, deeper than touch. It was as if the pendant knew him, as if it had waited decades for his hands to arrive, for the moment when his silence would finally meet its hidden resonance. Mariah's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of awe and fear, for she understood that the power she had guarded for so long was no longer dormant. It had chosen. The room seemed to hum with invisible energy. The curtain swayed gently, though there was no breeze. The light caught on the edges of the pendant, scattering gold and amber across Adrian's focused face. He did not speak. He did not cry out. Yet in the silence there was communication, profound and undeniable. Every movement, every pulse of his fingers on the object, echoed through the room in waves that could be felt rather than heard. Mariah's presence was steady and grounding, a protective shield around him, yet she dared not interrupt the flow of something far beyond her comprehension. Adrian's gaze remained fixed, wide and luminous, as if seeing the world for the first time in a way no one else could perceive. The pendant responded, subtly vibrating, pulsing in a rhythm that mirrored the boy's heartbeat. Shadows bent toward it. Floorboards seemed to hold their breath, and even the grand piano, silent for so long, vibrated faintly beneath the weight of anticipation. This was no ordinary moment. It was a threshold of the impossible, a silent convergence of fate, magic, and human will. Mariah exhaled softly, almost imperceptibly, allowing the boy the space to claim what was his. She had carried this secret for years, had known the danger it held, and yet the universe had arranged this precise instant. The pendant, the boy, the room alive with expectation. She sensed a shift, the imperceptible tipping of balance toward destiny. The energy between Adrian and the object thickened, pressing lightly against the boundaries of the room, bending time and stillness just enough to mark that this was not simply discovery, but awakening. For a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. The mansion, the estate, even the distant sun casting its golden warmth across the corridors, was secondary to the silent miracle taking place in that music room. Adrian's fingers lingered, almost reverent, and in that stillness, the first thread of connection formed, quiet but undeniable. A subtle glow began to emanate from the pendant as Adrian's small fingers lingered upon it, tracing its contours with a mixture of curiosity and reverence. The light was not harsh or blinding. It was gentle, almost breathing, casting golden and amber hues across his delicate face and the polished marble floor. Shadows in the room deepened, shifting as if alive, stretching along the walls to frame this quiet miracle. Adrian's world, so long defined by silence, now seemed to hum with a presence he could feel rather than hear, vibrating through his small body in rhythms both new and ancient. Mariah remained kneeling beside him, her hands hovering protectively near the pendant, aware that every tremor of power it released could be dangerous if mishandled. Yet she did not intervene. This moment was not hers. It belonged entirely to Adrian. She had carried the secret of the pendant for years, knowing its potential for both wonder and destruction, but the universe had orchestrated this encounter with precision. The boy before her, born into silence and limitation, was the key to unlocking what had remained dormant, waiting patiently through decades for a worthy heart to awaken it. Adrian's eyes widened as he felt the subtle pulse beneath his fingertips, a pulse that mirrored his own heartbeat. It was as though the pendant recognized him, as though it had been waiting for him all this time, reaching silently across the barriers of space and time to meet him. The room itself seemed to respond. The curtains fluttered slightly despite the absence of wind. The chandeliers above reflected the glow in patterns that danced across the walls, and even the grand piano, long a silent companion, resonated faintly beneath the weight of this invisible energy. For a moment, Adrian's gaze lifted to Mariah. In that look was understanding, a wordless acknowledgement of the magnitude of what he held. She returned the gaze, her eyes glistening with both fear and hope, knowing that this was a crossing of thresholds. Every careful movement, every delicate breath, carried a history of generations and the weight of something far greater than either of them could fully comprehend. The house itself seemed to pulse, alive with anticipation, as if it, too, had been waiting for this day. Adrian lifted the pendant slightly, holding it closer to his chest. Its glow intensified, warm and steady, as though breathing in tandem with him. Shadows in the corners of the room bent toward the light, responding to the energy he now held, amplify its presence until the boundaries of the music room felt fluid, almost malleable. The energy was alive, vibrant, and yet profoundly gentle, a force that demanded reverence, not fear. Mariah exhaled softly, letting go of the tension in her body, while her eyes never left Adrian. This was a pivotal moment, the point where the impossible began to stir. She had guided him to this, protected him until now. And yet she understood that from this point forward, he would walk alone on the threshold of what could only be described as miraculous. The light from the pendant pulsed once more, brighter and warmer, filling the room with a presence that transcended sight, sound, and even time. Adrian's fingers rested upon it, steady, and in the stillness, the first true shift occurred, the beginning of an awakening that would ripple far beyond the confines of the grand music room. Evening began to settle over the Whitmore estate, and the golden sunlight gave way to the soft amber hues of dusk. Shadows stretched across the marble floors and vaulted ceilings, lengthening until the music room seemed both intimate and impossibly vast. Adrian sat with the pendant in his hands, feeling its gentle pulse resonate through his small fingers and into his chest. Though he could not hear a sound, the energy it radiated spoke directly to him, a language older than words, older than human memory. Mariah remained close, kneeling beside him, her hands lightly hovering in case intervention was needed, yet her presence was entirely reverent. She had watched over Adrian since his earliest days, guided by instinct, intuition, and an unspoken promise to protect the boy who lived in silence. But now, she understood that this was beyond detection. This was awakening, a crossing into a realm where neither guidance nor caution could dictate the outcome. The pendant had chosen Adrian, and the boy's soul recognized its call. The room itself seemed to respond. Dust motes floated like tiny stars in a shifting glow, tracing patterns in the air that echoed the rhythm of the pendant's pulse. The chandeliers above reflected shards of gold and amber light onto the walls, their brilliance bending subtly as though to frame the boy and the mysterious object he now held. The silence that had defined Adrian's life was no longer emptiness. It was anticipation, a current of invisible energy that seemed to flow from the pendant into the house itself, awakening hidden corners and long-forgotten spaces. Mariah's heart pounded with the realization that this moment was fragile. Time seemed elastic, stretched taut by the extraordinary presence in the room. Every second felt as though it contained both possibility and peril. Yet Adrian remained steady, as though he had always known how to meet this moment, how to embrace the impossible that had been placed in his hands. In the distant corridors of the mansion, the sound of approaching footsteps went unnoticed by the boy. Yet the air seemed to hum with the arrival of something momentous. It was as if the house itself, ancient and knowing, had begun to anticipate the convergence of father and son. Every polished surface, every shadow, every flicker of fading sunlight seemed aligned, waiting for the moment when human and divine would collide. Adrian's gaze lifted to the pendant, tracing its intricate patterns, sensing the invisible threads of energy that flowed between them. The object responded, pulsing more brightly, bathing the room in light that felt alive. It was a warmth that touched the heart, a silent affirmation that the impossible was no longer beyond reach. Mariah exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her own body ease as she witnessed Adrian's silent communion with the pendant. She knew that this moment would ripple outward, far beyond the walls of the music room, far beyond the state itself. She had carried the secret for years, but now she was only a witness, a guardian of the threshold, as Adrian took the first steps into a world transformed. The pendant pulsed again, brighter and more insistent, a heartbeat in sync with the boy's own. Adrian's small fingers rested lightly upon it, steady, receptive, and alive to the impossible waiting to unfold. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next act of fate to arrive. The mansion had grown quiet, yet not in the ordinary sense. The silence carried weight, charged with expectation, as if the very walls of the Whitmore estate were aware that something extraordinary had awakened within the music room. Charles Whitmore, the billionaire patriarch, moved the corridors with measured steps, yet each one felt heavier than usual, as though the air itself resisted his passage. He did not hear a sound to explain the tension. Instead, he felt it deep in his chest, a pull he could not ignore, an instinct older than reason. Inside the music room, Adrian remained kneeling with the pendant, its gentle pulse like a heartbeat against his palm. Mariah sat close, her presence steady and watchful, but she did not interfere. The boy's connection with the object had grown stronger with each passing moment. The light that had once merely illuminated now seemed to breathe, expanding and contracted with a rhythm that mirrored the boy's own. Shadows bent toward him, responding to the pendant's silent energy, and the room itself seemed to hum with life, though no ear could perceive it. Charles paused in the hallway just beyond the music room, sensing the invisible current before he could see it. His instincts, honed over decades of business and power, told him that this was no ordinary disturbance. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable, a ripple of energy that set every nerve in his body on edge. He moved closer, eyes narrowing, heart pounding, drawn by a force he could neither see nor name. The mansion, so familiar and controlled in his life, felt transformed, as though the walls themselves leaned toward the epicenter of what was happening. Mariah's breath caught as she sensed movement outside the room. She had felt this before once long ago, in another place in another life, when the energy of the pendant had chosen someone it deemed worthy. Her hands hovered protectively, her gaze never leaving Adrian. The boy's small frame remained steady, his fingers still upon the pendant, his eyes reflecting the quiet intensity of one who was awakening to a world he never knew existed. The light from the pendant pulsed again, brighter now, and the room seemed to expand in response. Dust mote spun in slow arcs, shimmering in patterns that were almost sentient. The grand piano, long a silent witness to Adrian's solitude, vibrated faintly beneath the energy emanating from the object, as if acknowledging the miracle unfolding within the space. Mariah exhaled softly, holding her presence steady, aware that the next moments would define everything. Not just for Adrian, but for the family, the mansion, and something far larger than any human understanding. Charles stepped into the threshold, the glow from the pendant reaching him first. He did not speak. He did not move too quickly. His eyes fell upon his son, and in that instant he felt extraordinary, a presence that went beyond logic, beyond fear, beyond reason. Adrian lifted his gaze to meet his father's, unafraid, and in that silent exchange, a bridge was built between human and impossible, between what had been and what was beginning. The room seemed to hum in quiet approval, every shadow and every glint of fading light bending toward the boy and the object that had chosen him. Time itself appeared to pause, as though the universe was holding its breath, readying for the final act of awakening. The doorway received Charles Whitmore as though the house itself expected him. The pendant's glow pulsed gently, bathing the music room in a warm, almost sacred light. Adrian stood, small yet unwavering, cradling the mysterious object that had long awaited him. Mariah stepped back, her hands folded in silent reverence, knowing this moment was no longer hers to guide. She had carried the secret, protected it, and now she was only a witness to the impossible unfolding before her eyes. Adrian's gaze lifted to his father, steady and unflinching. For the first time since birth, he felt the world in a way words could not describe. The pendant pulsed in response, a subtle vibration that radiated through his body, into the marble beneath his feet, and into the air itself. The mansion, usually so rigid and imposing, seemed alive, its walls and chandeliers acknowledging the boy's awakening. The shadows leaned closer, the curtains swayed without a breeze, and even the grand piano, long silent, hummed faintly as if to herald the impossible now set in motion. Charles's breath caught as he stepped further into the room. There was awe, yes, but also an unnameable recognition, a sense that he was witnessing not just a miracle, but a destiny fulfilled. His son, born deaf and destined to live in silence, now connected with a force beyond understanding. The glow from the pendant reflected in Charles's eyes, and for the first time, he understood the weight of legacy, of love, and of choices made long before his son could comprehend them. Adrian's fingers rested lightly upon the pendant. The light intensified, flowing over him like a gentle tide. Yet its energy was alive, responsive, conscious. In that silence, he sensed the vibrations of the room, the pulse of the estate, the invisible threads of life all around him. Though no sound reached his ears, a symphony existed, a rhythm older than time, connecting the world to his family, to something far greater than himself. Mariah watched, tears glistening in her eyes. She had nurtured the boy, guided him, shielded him from a world that could not understand his silence. And now she saw him step beyond limitation, into a space where possibility and miracle intertwined. She knew that nothing could ever diminish this moment, that the universe itself had conspired to bring it into being. Charles finally spoke, though his voice was caught in awe, trembling with emotion. He did not scold, nor did he question. He simply stood, witnessing the impossible made tangible, the boy he had raised stepping into a power unseen, unimagined, yet wholly his own. The pendant pulsed one final time, brighter, warmer, as if affirming its choice, binding father and son in an unspoken understanding that transcended words. Adrian lifted his gaze to the ceiling, then back to Mariah, then to Charles. In that silent exchange, the room, the house, and the estate seemed to exhale, releasing centuries of anticipation. The impossible had occurred. The boy had touched the world in a way no one could have predicted. She knew this was only the beginning, for the dependent had truly chosen him. Then the world had just witnessed the awakening of something far older than miracles. And somewhere beyond understanding, a new fate began to breathe.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.